Well, Albertans have seen a lot of shuffling within the provincial government as of late. The UCP has been assigning ministerial positions. Others are looking to gain positions within the party, and there's a leadership vote in Red Deer in just a few weeks, meaning Jason Kenney is advocating to party members for a new mandate as leader. But is Jason Kenney popular enough to retain his position as leader of the UCP? Right now, Alberta politics is far more than Jason Kenney and the UCP. Joining me to discuss is former Medicine Hat radio personality Val Olson. Val, thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate having you on.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Jeanette.
Of course. So, Val, Jason Kenney was in Lethbridge over the weekend selling party memberships and asking members for another shot at the leadership of his party. So he seems very unpopular both in and out of the party. What do you think he has to do to retain his seat and win the next provincial election?
The question is he willing to do it? I think because he would have had a real eye opener in Lethbridge. I did hear that neighborhoods he was visiting, he did not have a positive response. And rightfully so. He really has pulled the bully card, in the neighborhood that it's affected all of us. There are no families across Alberta that haven't been impacted negatively by some of his mandates and policies. And we've talked an awful lot about his freedom sucking initiatives, but what can he do now? I think he has to step down gracefully. That's what he needs to do. He needs to start with two words: I'm sorry. And I don't believe that's going to happen. I'd love to be proved wrong on that, but he doesn't seem to take accountability for his own actions.
Wow. Now, Rachel Notley, of course, has been leading in a recent poll from a Canadian broadcaster at the end of January with 42% support, while Jason Kenney had only 31% support. So where have the other third of the voters given their support?
Well, the problem with polls is unless we see the data ourselves, meaning unless we're in the neighborhood in Lethbridge and we can visually see with our own eyes, this guy is not liked and he is not popular, we have to be real careful about polls because the most accurate thing we can do is go out and hit the doors ourselves. That would be one way to actually get a realistic polling of what's happening in our own neighborhood. Talk to 10 people, and out of 10 people, 9 will tell you, I don't want Jason Kenney as my master and ruler any longer.
Yeah, interesting, of course. Now, going back to this poll, of course, does this mean that almost 60% of Alberta voters don't support Rachel Notley and the NDP? Is there a possibility of vote splitting, or do Albertans have to get involved in the UCP and make it what they want?
Absolutely. The process is so important. We cannot just cast a ballot nonchalantly and walk away. Being a voter is a full-time job, and we really have to micromanage our vote. Accountability is so important. So it really starts with us taking initiative, getting on the boards, going through the process, and getting in the faces of these politicians. That is how you're going to see things change.
Okay, so we always hear about vote splitting and starting new parties, but is this just that the people don't want to do the actual work and salvage what they have in the UCP? What's your thought?
Well, Jeanette, we often hear, don't vote this way because you're going to cause vote split. Can you imagine carrying that weight on your back as the official vote splitter in your community? Isn't it an effective psychological weapon to use it like that, to go around telling people, you better vote this way because vote split, you don't want to be that person? And people just get shy and scared and say, oh, okay, well, tell me how to vote. And that's the problem with that tell me how to vote. We've got to lose that kind of talk. We got to lose that kind of thinking. And it's all about self-accountability and do the hard work, do the investigative research on who you're electing. I could use Jason Kenney as an example, as a politician who went to the elderly ladies and he told them, I'm all for saving babies' lives and, donate to my cause. I'm the champion of life, of freedom loving initiatives. And he really isn't. Look at what he hasn't done for, our largest and most important future Canadians. He's done nothing to protect their lives, but yet he has collected donations in the past saying that he was, the real spokesperson and go-to guy for saving babies' lives. So it's as simple as that. If we follow what comes out of their mouths and hold them to account and stop funding their initiatives that are anti-freedom, anti-family, that's when you're going to start seeing politicians like Jason Kenney sit up a little straighter and start listening to his largest vote block. And I'm just a reflection of our largest vote block, being families in Alberta.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Val, you and I have discussed before about how politics begins at the dinner table. So a lot of people have just talked about politics, but I think with the freedom rallies we've seen across Canada, wouldn't you agree that the tide is turning and people are doing more than just talking now? So many more people are becoming involved.
You nailed it, 100%. In fact, I was watching coverage from Ottawa in particular, where there was an elderly gentleman who was sitting in his semi and he held out a Ziploc bag of money. And he made sure to say this money came from a homeschooling family that had trekked across Ontario, who had sold eggs and came up with ways to raise money and wanted to do something for the truckers. That little guy was under the age of 12, and it melted my heart, because it has moved from the dinner table to discussions where mom and dad and children are strategizing together to come find ways to support the heroes who truly are standing up for our freedoms.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that Canada is beyond repair, or is there a chance for Canadians to fight against what we're seeing in Ottawa?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And I think we could start with our most important rights. I'm going to touch on freedom of speech because that impacts our religious community. There has been a real target on pastors, specifically in our Christian community. There are pastors that have been jailed, and it's been just gut wrenching watching their little children cry as dad is being hauled away to go to jail. Now, Canada is worth saving. These pastors are preaching the truth. They're spreading the good news message. And as of this hour, I'm thinking, at the Calgary Remand Center, one remains locked in custody away from his family. And people are coming in droves, showing up, praying, exercising their freedom of speech. They are waving Canadian flags. So our country, 100%, is freedom-loving people that are being united with the cause of love.
Mm-hmm. We've been hearing about a movement for Alberta to join America as a state. I've been hearing about this for years, actually. Do you think that this really could be a future possibility?
I'm telling you straight up, this is not a pipe dream. Discussions are happening. Wendy Rogers, she's actually a former member of the US Air Force and is an Arizona state senator. And just to quote her, she said, "Trudeau sucks so bad, we should start allowing Canadian provinces to declare independence and vote on US statehood." Okay, so again, that is an Arizona state senator who has went on Twitter and she's saying that. So she's getting a lot of traction. There is a movement. It's called the Alberta Statehood movement. Right now, as of this morning, I did do a check on membership, 9,200 members, and it just keeps growing. Now, it is a binational group, and it's a reunification group across North America. And so if you want to learn more about that, you can go on albertastatehoodparty.com. There are meetings, there's initiatives to get people fired up and get out there, get membership sold, and start saying why we need to do this. Now, reuniting Alberta with their social, cultural, historical roots, and best of all, economically, unite Alberta with its number one trade partner being 50 American states in permanent free trade just makes sense to Albertans. So there are a lot of people pursuing this idea because there's positives every which way you look. And so, yes, it is growing. And there are a lot of, hopes and dreams that are being planted right now, specifically in Arizona. I'm just looking at some of the involvement, and wow, it is impressive and it is a big deal.
Do you think that this actually has a serious chance of actually happening in the near future?
I do. I mean, to quote again, Trudeau sucks so bad. Okay, that's what a state senator, one of, is saying about our prime minister. And when you look at Jason Kenney, and he, was representing was supposed to be representing conservatism, he's done everything opposite of conservatism. So people are starved. They are starved for freedom, and they look to the United States and they look at what the Constitution stands for, the rights that it allows people. And we do not have the rights that Americans have in Canada. Just take what's happening right now in Canada. You could take pastors being jailed. You could take, the mandates that are still in place, all those kinds of things. Canada is really, set out as an eyesore on the big scale of human rights violations.
Okay, so Val, another issue facing Canadians and actually facing Americans too, like it seems to be happening everywhere, the high cost of inflation. And of course, this affects our grocery bills as well. So are there practical steps Alberta families can take to help with this? I know you do tend to advocate a lot for families and for moms.
Yes, so absolutely. And healthy eating, following the Canadian Food Guide is key. And what family can actually follow the Canadian Food Guide and its recommendations for healthy food when we look at the price at the grocery store? I mean, if you just want to go take beef as an example, beef is so important to a family. It's brain food, and parents can't afford to feed their kids Alberta beef. What on earth is going on, and what can we do? So, what many families are doing in Medicine Hat specifically, I've heard of families years ago doing this, but they were starting to purchase groceries wholesale. And this is happening now, even in Edmonton. So, there are groups that are coming together, families that are forming and saying, look, here's what we've got. Let's get the best that we can. And so it's groups that are shopping that way instead of going to the grocery stores and shopping the traditional way. They're really taking their own steps and stretching their dollar the best way that they can, which is amazing. There is so much to do that is just incredible. So if you're someone that is really noticing the pinch, start looking on Facebook. Look for these local groups that are popping up.
So sort of a communal approach to grocery shopping.
Yes.
It's very interesting, very neighborly as well. Val, it does look like we are running out of time, but thanks so much for joining me today. Really appreciate having you on again.
Thanks so much, Jeanette.